Welcome to episode 413 of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. I am Dave Deacon, and have we got a fantastic episode for you, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. We start with some exciting news in just a couple of minutes, and then we dive into an update on the roller coaster of Oklahoma crops. You know, you got your rains, you got your weeds, and then you got to weigh all the planting decisions that could make or break the season. And then we wrap it all up with a great conversation with Dr. Tieneke Trotter, who is a globe-trotting crop scientist from Australia, for a lively chat about sesame, sorghum, and farming on the other side of the planet. We'll get to our chat with her in just a minute, but before we do, if you're new to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast, I'd like to welcome you and invite you to hit that follow button where you get your podcasts. Just a reminder, you will be able to find all of the information we talk about in this episode and past episodes on our website, reddirtagronomy.com. Let's kick things off with a quick trip around the table for an introduction to the dream team of dirt and everything that grows from it. Let's start with Oklahoma State University Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist.
That's why we still have gleaners running, is they just reseed themselves.
Dr. Brian Arnell. And across from him is the cropping system specialist at Oklahoma State University.
That's not a high bar to jump there.
Dr. Josh Lofton. And across from him is a postdoctorate in the Plant Soil Sciences Department at Oklahoma State University as well.
Yeah, you can't have 3 trips to Chickasha in one day. It doesn't work out. We've had those. We just don't tell anybody.
Dr. Radon Sherry. Now, with all the formalities out of the way, we'll get to our chat with Dr. Tieneke Trotter that we recorded just last Wednesday, May 28th, 2025, in just a minute. But that'll be after we get a crop update right after the big announcement. So, without further ado, let's kick things off. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. So, Brian, the big news we've kind of been alluding to coming up in August. We're going to be part of the High Plains Journal Live up in Wichita. It's going to be a pretty cool event. You're going to be speaking at it.
I will be speaking, yes. So I get 2 different talks I'll be working on up there. I'll be working on one discussion going into basically farming on low inputs. How can we save input costs as we look at these tight margins? And as you know, is my game right now, I get another discussion on the use of biologicals and microbials in production and what we've seen, talking about some of the multi-state cotton work. And then, we've got a lot of active stuff right now in corn and cotton that we'll be able to throw in because this will be the 1st of August.
August 6th through the 8th at the Century 2 Event Center up there.
In Wichita.
And the cool thing about this is people may have been to different High Plains Journal events like Cattle U, Alfalfa U, Sorghum, Wheat U, Soil U, all of those. It's kind of, brought them all together, have a trade show going on. And they're saying more than 100 exhibitors going to be there. So
yeah, pretty good lineup. I mean, definitely not me, but we got Shannon Farrell. I almost called him Will Farrell. That would be great.
Never thought about that. Yeah,
just as entertaining.
Yeah, I know. He really is. I mean, he is the best. But Doc Farrell will be up there talking about stuff. Also, Jeff Whitworth, K-State specialist. Rosalind Biggs, who's with OSU, and I've gotten to know Dr. Biggs lately. Her daughter does a lot of stuff with my daughter, so they're both
cool.
in the livestock judging, and the Bigs are big on horse judging, and my daughter's about to get into that, so I'm so excited. We also have Brent Bean with Sorghum Checkoff, somebody that Josh gets to work with on a regular basis.
And the cool thing is it's not just OSU, it's K-State, it's different universities coming together with industry folks. And again, that's going to be August 6th through the 8th in Wichita at Century 2 Performing Arts and Convention Center. And you can find a link to it on our website, reddirtagronomy.com, or you can go to live.hpj.com and can register for it there. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be recording some Red Dirt Agronomies up there as well. Folks be able to learn lots of great things from industry professionals while they're at the HPJ Live. So hope to see you guys up there. Who's doing the wheat update or the crop update?
Radon can do wheat update. Okay, then Josh will move into the summer crops.
Radon, how's the wheat crop looking across the great state of Oklahoma?
It's kind of a mixed bag right now, Dave. First thing, there's kind of 3 categories of wheat right now.
Yeah.
We have some decent wheat out there. It looks really good on the road. Get into it. It's a little thin, but it's coming along. It's going to finish. We have decent wheat that got hailed out.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of that around.
Right.
Had a lot of damage, wind damage, whatever. And then we've got no wheat.
Right.
And there's some of that too. So, I mean, a lot of the crop tours and things, 35 bushel average, but there's a lot of that wheat that's been really hit hard the last, 30 days or so.
Yeah.
Storms and things like that coming through. And so we'll see what happens.
A lot of weed pressure
Yeah.
came and broke through, so we've seen a lot of wheat laid down the last week or so just due to weed pressure, a lot of rye, cheap brooms. So we did that lack of canopy really allowed the weeds to punch up and punch through the last couple of weeks. So a lot of stuff laid down, a lot of concern about that wheat that does go to harvest being really bad as far as the weed and weed seed within that. So we'll see how harvest goes, but it is it's crazy. A month and a half ago, you'd go out and walk a wheat field and you wouldn't give it much of any chance of making anything. And then the rains hit and it really came on, looked good for a while, and then we've had this flush of weeds. So we go from a lot of concern, the wheat's doing a lot better than we thought, now we have a weed problem. And so it's kind of Raiden said, it is a little bit of a mixed bag that's out there.
So if we look back over 60 days, let's pick a site down in southern Oklahoma. Let's say Tipton or Frederick. Frederick's had 21 inches of rain since in the past 60 days. And you pick a place up, say, up in the Panhandle, Goodwell, 4 inches. well, they flooded in Optima Lake is now.
The jet skis are rolling.
But I mean, it's been a wet spring, and that has kind of lent itself to the weed pressure we're seeing.
Yeah, and with that, summer crops, Josh, I mean, we got a lot of corn in. Some folks beat that rains, and now everybody's just kind of piecing in the rest of the crops, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think at least right now, corn's the only one that I'm satisfactorily happy with. I mean, because it went in before everything, it's kind of held up through a lot of these storms because it's been small. And so it's going to do nothing but take advantage of it. I've seen it really grow in the last couple of weeks. There's some good pockets of sorghum that have been in. There's some pockets of sorghum that never went in. Same thing with soybean, same thing with cotton. I mean, there's just a little bit of everything. The stuff that got in ahead and timely, probably most of it's looking okay. They're going to suffer from the same weed issue that the wheat is because Dave, you were given 60 days, but if you even look at 30 days out and you start looking at numbers in 10 inches, 11 inches, over on the eastern side of the state, 13 inches. I mean, there's no pre's left anymore.
Yeah.
So we're working with nothing but in-season management and control at this point in time. And like I said, for the corn, we're starting to break through what the pre's would have given us anyway.
Right.
And so we're fine. For sorghum and soybean that maybe was planted in the last, 20 days or something, we still would have liked a couple more weeks of that pre while that canopy got developed, and we probably lost all of that. So weed control is going to be an issue. I mean, it always is.
Yeah.
We typically always get these rains, and this time it's a little exacerbated compared to what I think we've seen at least in the last couple of years.
Right.
You go back to 15, 16, I think this is about the same rainfall pattern we were getting back then. But, I mean, over in the last couple of years, this is a little more intense than we've gotten. It's still the same typical rainfall pattern. I'll be really interested to see what June brings us. I'd like it to keep raining, much to the dismay of most of the wheat producers around the state. But, I mean, if we can, and get a really good soil profile before July, we might be looking at a really strong summer crop that they got in. We still got to get a lot in. So my two questions are: is there a time or need to replant? And then I guess it's tied into that first question. But I remember years ago, you and I were at Perkins, and you showed me a drowning soybean plant. Is that something that we're running into? And then I guess
is there time or a need to replant?
So replant's always a tricky venture, and I know it's not in Oklahoma, but Eric Larson out of Mississippi State always did some really good stuff out of corn, and basically kind of went to depending on when it was in that season, that you could, if your optimum for corn, let's say, is 25,000. That's kind of where you want it to be. You could almost go down to 15 to 12,000 before replant is even worth it, because of how much delayed you are and how much just allowing those crops to fill in the blanks and kind of make with it of what it could was better than completely tearing everything out and redoing. Spot planting's the same way. Is then you have, we were talking about this morning, some old work that Bill used to do on like delayed emergence, and we were talking about a couple of days turning into a weed. Now you're talking about 3 or 4 weeks delayed. So unless you have once you go down off of this terrace, everything is bad down here and everything is good up here, then even spot planting gets questionable at some point in time. So we'll see. We still got a lot to get in, and the big question we've gotten is it too late? Should I kick the ball to mid-June? Because
that's a question.
Historically, we've always said you don't plant in May, and I think that's probably a misidentified statement. I don't think that that's the right thing. You can plant in May because some people have had their best crops in May. Myself included, some of my best sorghum plots that we've ever had were planted in the middle of May. Rick Coconut, if you're listening to this, Rick,
I was going to blame Rick anyways.
Don't plant in May.
Yeah.
And so I've started telling growers, you can plant in May, because we've gotten to these, all through April, we were super dry, and then we've been wet basically ever since. Not planting in May is not what we want to do. You have to inherently know your risk of crop failure has gone up by quite a bit. Then we get to the question of, if it's middle of May, do I just kick it to the middle of June? Sure, that's a more stable time period for us to grow things like sorghum, to grow things like soybeans, to grow things even potentially like, I won't even say cotton, but like even corn, we could probably kick a little bit later. But are we going to have these good conditions in June? And that's another thing we don't know.
Right.
And then we have a year like last year to where September was our hottest month. All our double crop was horrible, but even the late planted full season did better. So that's the whole thing of you can't say these weeks we just don't plant. You just have to know inherently, based on our climate that we normally get in Oklahoma, there's a risk planting right now. If we wait 2 weeks, that risk potentially goes down, but that doesn't mean it always is going to be lower.
So go in and describe the risks that you're talking about.
So the risk we're talking about is consistently our hottest and driest weeks on average historically were the last 2 weeks in July and the first 2 weeks in August. Those are typically our hottest and driest weeks of the year combined. And so what we don't want to have happen is go through our critical reproductive stages during that. So we don't want sorghum to be filling berries. We don't want soybeans to be filling pods. We don't want corn to be going from milk to dough during that stage. So those kind of really critical stages. We don't want that to happen. But if like I said last year, that 4 weeks of hottest and driest wasn't in that time, it was in September.
Oh, yeah.
And so that last part of July and first part of August was actually okay. It was rather cool compared to what we got in September. So the risk of crop failure because of those hottest and driest times, delaying or decreasing our yield potential are there. That's where the risk inherently is. If we get, I was talking to Rod Jones the other day, if we get a July 4 rain and a first 2 week in August rain, kind of everything is going to be okay. We just don't know if we're going to get it.
Yeah.
And
which comes back to the why I'm against the don't plant in May. that middle of May, it's because we are not consistent in a weather pattern. And maybe we were 15 years ago when Gokenauer, and that's who really sold it on the sorghum. Like I listened to him hundreds of times saying, never plant in May. Well, sometimes as a researcher, we'd have to, and you and I know as researchers, we'll just plant because at least we got it in the ground, it's consistent. And I've had my best yields and some farmers plant around me in May, but it's because we rolled the dice and had that weather. And so it's more one of those of, I'd say, go ahead and plant in May and kick some to June, so you're diversifying spreading your risk out, just like changing up varieties or something. With summer crops, wheat, we can change varieties to spread your risk on maybe a disease, this or that. Planting date, you're also spreading your risk about when's that heat going to come. When's that heat going to come?
Well, and I'll say winter crop school, I got called out because I always, held to the thing of like, we don't plant past July 15th. And I think one of the boys from Wheeler Brothers is like, well, my best soybean I ever got was August 1. So it's like, okay, yeah, we don't typically want to still be planting soybean in August, but if we have a really open fall, we don't get a freeze, it does get to take advantage of some cooler weather and some really typically a more wetter cycle, but we can't freeze until after Christmas. And so there's just, again, you shouldn't have this cutoff, but you should know that risk just exponentially increases once you get out of that optimum timing. Now, from a crop insurance, there is a right and wrong time to plant.
Right.
But all of that is because they don't want to carry that extra risk that potentially we have to carry by planting outside that time. So crop insurance, separate discussion, but from an agronomic standpoint, we're still open to planting. Right now, we're kind of in a risky period, but we're hoping that these conditions kind of hold true and we can get some mid-June planting, some Father's Day planting, as the guys around here always say, and get a lot of good crops in then.
I still remember years ago we were at the Lahoma Field Day and I was talking to Chad Godsey, and he had this forecast of, this crop is not going to form. It's too late. It's all of this. And I said, so it sounds like this could be the best crop ever. And he had this deadpan look at me like, did you hear anything that I just said? But it turned out it was a bumper crop of, I can't remember if it was canola or what it was, maybe been soybeans or sorghum. I can't remember. But it turned out that as dire as it looked at that point in time, it turned out to form a good crop. But that's just Oklahoma.
Well, you go back to 19. You talked about 19 when there was flooded soybeans and you were out there and me and you did a story.
Yeah.
That went from an abysmal situation because we were flooded and we had spotty stands to the best looking soybeans I've ever had.
Right.
To zero yield because then it turned off hot and dry.
Oh, yeah.
So we went through 2 whole cycles in that summer alone because those soybean plants ended up growing 3 or 4 feet tall that year. Right. I mean, it had a nice cool June, a cooler July, and then end of July, 1st of August hit, and it just turned off 110 degrees with no water, really high winds, and it just kind of stripped the crop out. So we got time. There's plenty of time. We are just opening that late planting window. After Memorial Day, we just start to open that. So we have time. Take advantage of these great conditions.
Yes.
We have great conditions out there once you're not, going down to your shin in mud out there, but take advantage of these. We don't often get this much rain this point in time to take advantage of.
So really, I mean, in 19, it would have been a really good edamame crop. It had
the best one we've ever had.
Right, but we
also the first one we've probably ever had. So
the beans were setting. We were pushing for a full soybean crop. Should have left it edamame.
Should have gone into that market.
Should have just bailed them. That's what you should have done.
That's what we ended up doing. That's what Brian ended up doing. I know that 100%.
That's real management. You don't have to worry about weed management if you don't bail it.
So, Brian, we have a distinguished guest here today.
We do, and I thought the conversation about risk and planting and trying to run crops in risk environments pretty on par with our guest today, Dr. Tieneke Trotter. She's University of Queensland. She's a visiting scientist here in the States, hanging out with us here in Stillwater for a couple months. And I'll let her introduce herself. But her environment is slightly risky also when it comes to trying to grow a crop.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Brian. It's been really interesting listening to you guys and your challenges. And in my head, I'm trying to do some really quick conversions. When you're saying planting in May, what does that mean in Australia? And so the equivalent month, 6 months apart, we're talking November planting. And for a lot of the crops that you're talking about, we'd never go that late. And there's a number of reasons for that around weather, around severe weather events, and the risk that is carried with that. So yeah, quite an interesting conversation, and quite interesting being able to see this for myself while I've been here as well. These exchanges that we get to do across the globe really help with building knowledge around agriculture. So it's an exciting time.
So we've already had Tieneke's husband on, Mark. He's been on a previous podcast when he was visiting. But they just uprooted themselves and their two boys and dropped into Oklahoma for a couple months, both visiting, Mark on the NSI side and Tieneke working in crops. And the boys are getting a true Oklahoma life, a little bit of 4-H shooting sports and other things. But Tieneke, can you talk about what you do at the uni and your focus there and why you're spending the time in Oklahoma?
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys here in Oklahoma, your reputation precedes you. We knew about you over in Australia, and we were just super keen. Both Mark and myself were really keen to come and join your teams over here to learn and to engage with you guys. I work at Central Queensland University in Australia. I'm based in Rockhampton, and when I'm there, I am largely a researcher. I'm looking at new and emerging crops for Northern Australia. Northern Australia is really largely an extensive beef producing area, and so I'm part of the minority over there. So it's exciting to be here and to be part of maybe the leading force in agriculture in the region, which is very exciting. I do a little bit of teaching. I teach a couple of units, but largely my time is spent with different research teams right across the north. I don't just focus in Rockhampton. I work up into far north Queensland, up into the Northern Territory, and then across into the north of Western Australia as well. So pretty big footprint there.
Yeah, to go visit sites, she has to get a plane and fly out because she can't just drive to several locations.
Yeah, so one of my sites is accessed via 3 flights. I fly from Rockhampton down to Brisbane across to Darwin, and then Darwin across to Kununurra. So it's at least a full day's travel to get there and back. Driving's not an option, and there is a bit of driving in getting to those places as well.
You better not forget anything back home. Because you're not going back just to grab a...
Right, and don't forget the frickin' nozzle.
Yeah, you can't have 3 trips to Chickasha in one day. It doesn't work out. We've had those. So, we just don't tell anybody.
Right, and I think you'd be fantastic in Australia because while you can't forget anything, and while you can't make a trip back to even a really closest town, sometimes you can't get hold of it, you turn into a bush mechanic. And I've seen these bush mechanic skills since I've been here in Oklahoma, and it's 100%. I feel like you'd be cut out for that kind of work in Australia.
Yeah, maybe. I'd like to go down there and see, especially cotton country down in there. I think I've seen some 60-inch wide spacing cotton and some social media stuff, and that stuff, it's taller than me, which I'm not that tall, but
you're really
it's
short.
still
that's not a high bar to jump there.
Yeah, 5'8" and a quarter, in case anybody wondered. But yeah, it's a lot of fun reading about agriculture in Australia, the crops and some of the similar systems and things like that. Sorghum, my old boss used to do a lot of work on sorghum in Australia. But the cotton industry too is really cool. So,
talk about some of the emerging crops. I mean, you're here. You had a lot of interest, and you're visiting a lot with sesame. So talk about the bringing in sesame into the region and why that looks to be or is an option for you guys.
Yeah, this is a really interesting challenge for us. So sesame is probably our primary emerging industry for Australia at the moment, particularly within our group. There's a number of emerging industries that are being worked on within Australia. Industrial hemp is a really neat one, looking at insects as an emerging industry. So there's a few out there that are currently being worked on, but sesame is a really important one for our group. About 5 or 6 years ago, we did some proof of concept with sesame to see if it could grow across the north, and we saw that it did really well. We were working with some old genetics. They were shattering types, and so we were experiencing a lot of challenges, but what we did see was that sesame produced really well, it yielded really well, and it coped well with our heat and some of our really significant big dumps of rain weather events. Our rain, we do get a fair bit in summer across the north, but it doesn't come in nice sprinkles and nice showers. It just comes in these great big dumps that land in a short period of time. Sometimes, for example, recently, 12 inches in 24 hours. Those kind of big dumps of rain that
more
lead
of a
to flooding
monsoon
events.
kind of system.
Very much a monsoon system. Very summer dominant rainfall, often quite dry over the winter. But what we found is that the temperatures that we're getting across the north mean that we can grow sesame sometimes all year round. And so we saw that this was showing potential. And we were lucky enough to secure 2 big bundles of funding that have helped to be able to drive some of that investigation over the next 5 years. In the process of doing this research and trying to develop the agronomics and trying to develop the mechanisation and sometimes working with some challenges because we're working in, as I described before, a largely an extensive beef production area. So there are not a whole lot of precision planters around. So how can we work with existing equipment and make good of a crop? Because getting a plant or a crop in the ground and getting it established is really a significant part of the success that you're going to see for the rest of the season. So there are a number of these challenges, and every time we look to investigate something else, we kept looking over to the US. So the US has got what has potentially in the past been a more established sesame industry, and one that is still continuing, and I've kind of learnt that while I've been here, that sesame here in the US has got a lot of knowledge, but it's potentially a little bit struggling at the moment around a couple of key issues. That's incredible learning for us because it's helping us to see what we kind of need to stay ahead of. Probably things like weed issues are the ones that are really jumping up as our as some of the real key things that we're going to have to be able to manage, weeds and pests in our sesame.
So just hold on. So is it correct? Because I looked this up. Rockhampton, 23 degrees south. Yeah, so a little bit further south of where we would be. Just on the opposite end. So just for listeners to kind of see, we're talking down in the southern parts of Texas is the equivalent. So just for reference, I wanted to add that in.
And you go back. When you said good yields, what kind of yields were you guys seeing?
For sesame, for the shattering types, in our trial plots, we were sometimes getting up to around 3 tonnes to the hectare on a small scale. So I know that's
about 45 bushel if you're on the 63 tons. So that's like 2,800 pounds per acre right there. 2,800 pounds per acre.
I really like working with Brian because he can do these calculations on the fly. When we're in Australia and working with the metric system, we get really lazy. Everything's in round numbers. And
need to throw a fraction in there, mix it up a little bit. So some decent yields. We're not seeing up at that level with the lines that we're using now. The non-shattering lines are yielding slightly lower, but we're seeing other
other benefits to them, particularly a lot less harvest loss. Shattering is terrible.
If you grow 3 ton but can only get 1 ton in the combine, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, but you don't have to worry about seeding it the next year.
You don't.
You gotta just look at it positively. Whenever that, it's kind of like wheat. You don't have, let it just go to, if you're grazing out, just let it go to grain.
That's why we still have gleaners running. Is they just reseed themselves.
The old silver seeder.
That old fabled perennial sesame crop.
Perennial sesame crop.
Right now, I guess my question, you already said weed management. What is kind of the standard weed management system in sesame in Australia? Is there really anything really documented yet?
Yeah, so we're working on a few little tactics, making sure that we've got a really good knockdown or a double knock ahead of planting is really important. So we want to plant into a clean field, whatever that kind of looks like, to be able to accomplish that. So all of that pre-season before planting is really crucial. We then have a little bit of a regime that we're working with around applying 2 different herbicides. One would be a post-planting but pre-emergent herbicide that we'd use to deal with broadleaf weeds, and then if we leave it about a week or 10 days, we can put a grass-based herbicide on. And we've got an industry development body in Australia, the Australian Sesame Industry Development Association, are working on making sure that we've got some of those permits in place, and that's been really critical to be able to enable that industry. And so keeping it clean really early on is really important. Once sesame gets up, and particularly when it closes canopy, it tends to outcompete. We do pretty well once we've got our planting configurations right in a closed canopy. If there's a gap in between, we can do some inter-row cultivating if our producers that we're working with have got the machinery to do that. And we typically do that within the first 5 weeks before we saw sesame go to flower. Past that, we're potentially using desiccants to help dry the crop down because we're in quite a humid environment, and that might help to knock out some of those really late season weeds as well, and help us to get a slightly cleaner harvest.
The funny thing is, so we were talking about sesame and weed management, and she was talking about how once the sesame gets up in the canopy, it'll just outcompete. Because I had said that pigweed or amaranth is one of our biggest challenges in sesame. And she said, "Oh, the same thing down there in Australia." And I was like, "But our sesame won't usually outcompete that pigweed." So we come to find out that their pigweed that they're dealing with in those fields is more of a ground cover pigweed,
more
where ours is the more, the palmer, more upright and has a lot of growth. So when she's talking about that, I mean, it really outcompetes that ground cover pigweed. What you would maybe think of like a tumble pigweed versus a palmer that we would see, or our mare's tail that's the issue. So
what's your row spacing?
That's an interesting question because it depends on the farmers that we're working with and the system that we're in. We'll go anything from 1 metre centres to then potentially 4 rows or 25 centimetres, so I think is that about 8 inches?
7.5 inches.
On a 1 metre bed. And so that just depends whether or not we're using overhead irrigation, whether we're growing dry land, or whether we're using furrow irrigation. So it's sort of a little bit horses for courses, and we're trying to work in with systems and planting.
He likes that one.
Horses for courses sounds like a new phrase.
He's trying to process what it means.
I'm processing.
You've got to put the right horse on the right course. You can't use the wrong horse in the wrong area. And so being able to adapt to each of these different farming systems and environments is really what's going to be key to getting the industry established in Australia. So we try to be flexible. We try to work in with farming equipment. We don't want producers reworking beds just because we've decided that it should be all on 7.5 inch rows. And the one thing that we have found has worked really well with sesame, and you were talking about that before, Josh, compensation of plants. If you've got a few skips, if you've got things missing or not coming up evenly, sesame is an incredible compensator. So while we're trying to sometimes get a single, or regularly trying to get a single stemmed plant with pods really loaded on that main leader, if we don't get that, it will branch and it will put pods on onto those branches as well, and so it fills in the gaps, and that might lead to a slightly less uniform harvest, and that really then means that we need to either withhold as much moisture as we can, or we need to use desiccants to get ourselves there.
One thing I don't know if you've come across, one thing that I came across with the compensating when we were doing a lot more sesame work, the challenge with that crop, even more so than canola, because canola is a great compensator, is the stalk diameter. When you had poor stands, and I remember cutting some stuff out west that we had a hard time getting through it because the sickle on the sickle bar on the combine wasn't as wide as the stalk was, because we're talking single plants that were easily 2.5 meters tall. I mean, we're talking huge plants with diameters, easily 8-9 centimeter diameter.
I wish I could see that. I have never seen that.
Huge. But it is in one of those scenarios where the treatment caused some stand reductions, but the plants were extremely healthy, had good growth. So you'd have a plant here, and then you'd go, 30 inches over would be the next plant. And this is on 15-inch or 30 centimeters spacings. And so not 30. It'd be,
30 inches?
30. No, it was on 15-inch spacings. 650. About 45 centimeters. And so
he's missing that 0.54
I
on
was
that.
wrong.
Doesn't know how to move that decimal.
Those fractions.
My calculator blinked. When you had the old solar calculators and they would blink on you, that's just what happened in my head. It's just went.
It blinked off.
But just the stalks, we had to actually go out there with machetes and cut the plants down and shove them into the combine to get them. But the plants just got so huge in that one growing season. We were cutting, 7,000 pound sesame that year. It was an amazing year.
The interesting thing is having the desiccants is also really beneficial, because our first 10 years of sesame in Oklahoma, we couldn't use desiccation. And, we could dry out a sesame plant really easily in August, but that's not when it's maturing. So it's much harder to dry out a sesame plant in October, November. So even if you would be able to get through and try to bend that plant, it wouldn't snap. It was just, it's gummy and it's big and it's hard to deal with. So yeah, it's a challenge. So outside of weeds, and we've talked about this before, one of the other things that was our issue is sesame leaf roller, and you guys have had that as well in sesame. How have you guys dealt with that in sesame in Australia?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So we talked about doing some proof of concept pilot trials about 5 years ago, and sesame worked beautifully, and we didn't see sesame leaf roller. We were in the honeymoon phase, which you often have with the first couple of years of growing anything new. Sesame leaf roller is in now, and it's significant. It's causing some major issues, and we do have a registered insecticide for using on sesame leaf roller. However, we're trying to work out what those thresholds are, so that we can determine whether or not we should be putting that insecticide on. Australia has got largely a lot of really good beneficial predatory insects, and so if we're seeing those in the crop and we're seeing a low number of sesame leaf rollers, we'll often wait and see if we can let the natural biology in the field sort of sort out the issue itself. If it gets to a point where the leaf rollers are starting to bunch up a lot of the tips, we would then start to apply insecticides in order to help control that. The younger the plant, the more crucial it is to put the insecticide on. a larger, more mature plant can cope. The only instance where I'll say that isn't the case is where we had a really prolonged wet season up in far north Queensland, and there were two cyclone events quite close to each other, so hurricanes for the US equivalent, and some flooding of the field, and there was sesame leaf roller in that sesame crop at the time. We couldn't get on to spray. The sesame leaf roller turned into sesame stem borer, sesame pod borer, and it just ended up decimating the entire crop, and the crop was fairly mature at the time. So at that point, where there's hot, there's humid environments, and there is a insect issue, really timely application and keeping an eye on the weather is really important to ensure that you keep your crop.
So, and I mean, that's sesame, but the amount of crops y'all grow up in that little corridor of the world is massive. I mean, we talked about even sugar cane being up there, little bits of cane, and then our all the crops we grow here. And so you guys got a large crop industry. You said it's rather small compared to the beef, but you got a lot of crops that you lot of very diverse, so a lot of different ecoregions there and different climatic regions that you have to deal with and manage all these crops in between.
Yeah, there really are. And there's a couple of major industries that are sort of established in those agricultural ecology kind of climatic areas. So sugarcane is one of them, pretty dominant in northern Australia. Cotton is another one that's fairly dominant across the north. It is grown down into all the way down into southern New South Wales. So over summer it can be grown quite far south. Southern Australia has got a lot of variety in different cotton cropping from different grains and legumes. Across the north, in different pockets, we will have anything from mung beans and soybeans to areas that we call sort of fruit and vegetable bowls. So big horticulture orchard areas with mangoes and bananas, and then field crops like tomatoes and your peppers and fresh beans, those sorts of things as well. So there's a lot of diversity, often in centralised kind of areas, because of the climate, but also because of infrastructure and services that are required in order to help manage harvest, getting crops to market.
But the other thing, the difference in scale of Australia crop production versus the United States crop production is pretty massive. I mean, we were talking about the number of, the amount harvested or the amount of total area of these individual crops are quite a bit different between the two countries.
Hugely different. So in Australia, we will farm often around the circumference of Australia. We might crop farm several hours inland, but we're not farming in central Australia. That's largely desert. So even though our land masses are quite a similar size, we have far less agricultural arable land to farm on. And so you guys are farming just orders of magnitude larger land areas. You're producing in some of your very small landmass states sometimes more grain than Australia produces across the nation on an annual basis. So it is orders of magnitude different, but our population is also orders of magnitude different. We're a much smaller population, we've got less people to feed, and we do still export a lot of what we're producing as well. Our yields are often reasonably good, but we are producing far less than the US.
Wait, go ahead.
No, you go.
So you say you're exporting a lot. Where, I mean, we've kind of, in the United States today talked a lot about where our exports are and some challenges that we're currently facing with exports in the export market. So where is your predominant countries that Australia exports a lot to? Do you guys have good trade partner countries, or is it kind of just commodity dependent based on where it's going?
It is a little bit commodity dependent. We do try to supply to our domestic market first and foremost, and then we have got really good close proximity to Southeast Asia. So we will be exporting a reasonable amount into Southeast Asia, Japan, China, depending on the crop. Wheat is one of our biggest commodities that we produce in Australia as a grain crop, and we even export a tiny little bit of that into the US. But I think that's more about an exchange of genetics and lines rather than an actual supply scenario. So we do have our grains and our crops going potentially all around the world, into India, into any of those close, geographically close Southeast Asian countries as well.
So if we take a little, because I know Brian wants to get somewhere before we wrap up, but if we take a little spin, the other reason why you're here is wanting to establish kind of like a crops team in Australia, and that you've worked with Dr. Haggard here a lot on what she's done, and so talk about the value or the potential and where you see that going in Australia in the future.
It's been a real eye-opener working with Dr. Haggard and understanding the level of engagement that is happening here in the US between your colleges, within your FFA, and how you're engaging young people and developing up skills that are going to make them really ready to work in industry. So I've been watching a national competition that you guys have here, and researching and finding out that it's more than 100 years old. It's really established. It's really well developed. We had a crop judging competition in Australia for about a decade in the 2010s, and it finished up just before or the year that COVID hit. So we haven't had one since 2019. And so I've been watching how and learning how your system here works in order to be able to bring some of that knowledge back to Australia, to be able to address the challenges of setting up something that is so big, that requires so many different partners and people to be invested, often giving up their time, personal time, to make these things happen, and make it valuable for industry. In Australia, we have got 6 jobs for every 1 graduate that we are getting out of agriculture. We have got a real issue with developing a workforce that can service our industry, and that's at jobs at every single level. Jobs in all different fields in agriculture, and we need to work out a way that we can better attract young talent, not necessarily kids that are off farms, because sometimes that's just not an option, but kids who have got a really good brain for problem solving, and for seeing scenarios and being able to work things through. So I see the opportunity to bring a crop judging competition and back to Australia, get it reinvigorated, is that chance to engage young people, get them interested in agriculture, have industry meeting them at that table, and helping to provide opportunities for jobs and direction as well, so that young people understand what kind of jobs are out there and available for them, and then interest them into studying.
So what do you think is the greatest pinch point at the moment on getting that done? Or what's the greatest hurdle you're going to have to cross?
I think being able to corral all of the industry that we're going to need in order to get them at the same table, having a conversation around what that competition could look like, getting all of our industry partners together, and both providing cash support but also in-kind support, their knowledge, their time, in order to pull it together. I think coordinating that is going to be the primary challenge. Once we have a method and a system in place, I think we'll be able to continue to keep that rolling better, but I think it needs to be more collaborative. In the past, when it ran for that 10 years, it was run sort of largely out of one industry body, and they perhaps weren't supported as much as they needed to keep that rolling into the future. So more stakeholders at the table, hopefully collaborating well together, and being able to see how you guys do that here is going to be really important to bring that back. And also utilising some of your expertise, like Dr. Haggard, as mentors for our Australian setup is going to be really important too. So having those connections with people who are having success here.
So in the last couple of minutes, want to just kind of spend, like I said, the last couple of minutes of the podcast just visiting about what it's been like for the family to be in the States. You know, the
tornado season,
through all the things.
Goat roast.
The goat roast that didn't involve a goat.
The goat kind of pig roast thing.
The goat pig roast. But, what's it been like for the family? What are the boys, what are they missing back home? But what have they enjoyed about the States? Just kind of that experience of being in the States for a couple months now.
The entire time we have been over here, we have had some incredibly eye-opening experiences. You guys, and in such a good way.
In particular.
The goat roast.
Brian says, "What are your kids missing?" And I actually don't know. They haven't actually particularly longed for anything back home, which really has a lot to say about how happy and comfortable they are here. My boys are 14 and 15-year-old teenage boys. It's all about what's in front of them. And if they're not happy, then we do know about it, and they are really happy. So we've just been so lucky. We've really landed on our feet here. Having said that, we can go through a couple of the things. A week into being here, Oklahoma, particularly Stillwater and a couple of the areas around it were hit by fires. This is not an unfamiliar thing for people coming from Australia, but a devastating thing when we saw the communities here struggling with that. So that was our welcome, and it has been really exciting to see an outworking of the phrase that we heard so many times, Stillwater strong. So that was really something quite special as an outworking of a traumatic thing. We went to a goat roast that did not involve a goat. It involved a pig, and it was fantastic. Watching the dynamics of the team and how everybody kind of worked together and just pulled this off was just such a special thing. And then being able to hear some of the songbirds that are in this department as well, with their guitars and their beautiful voices. What a special afternoon that was. I have a son who has got into clay pigeon shooting, and now a husband who has got into clay pigeon shooting.
He's quite good.
So news to me, and so that's going to be really exciting. They have already looked up a club that they can go to when they go back, because this is something that they don't want to leave, which is lovely. I have my 15-year-old has been so incredibly embraced by the Stillwater High School community. He has been looked after by the band kids and the track kids, and everybody has just been so wonderful and gracious. And he has studied meteorology, which has been really useful when we have been driving around and trying to work out how to avoid some of these weather systems that we're a little bit cautious of, being new to this region. We have had just the most fantastic time over here. I love your wildlife. I love your wildflowers, the roadside wildflowers. There just seems to be something new every 2 weeks. There's something new that pops up. I saw my third hummingbird this morning, which is always a very exciting thing. We don't have any in Australia. So it strikes me that whenever I go somewhere in the world and I get to stay there for more than a couple of weeks and actually start to see the community, that's when you really start to form these connections. And this is really something that our family has just absolutely loved. This area will always be close to our hearts.
Well, the oldest got to go to a prom.
I mean, he had 2 invites in like 24 hours. That's
cool.
That dude, you drop in the long flowing Aussie accent. I mean, he was. I heard about this Australian kid, and I knew they were here. I was hearing it from my middle school daughter about the Australians who dropped in.
So, just like in Australia, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Right. But he did go to prom, and when it was over and he loved it, he asked if there might be another one before we ended up leaving. So clearly welcomed with open arms, and we're so grateful.
I got to say, it's funny. So in the new Ag Hall, people don't know, so a lot of our grads are just in one large area. So we have 77 spots in this grad office where Josh, I, and Steve Phillips are at. And we got Tieneke's spot here in the desk. And I always know when she's in, because it's like the court holds around Dr. Trotter's desk. It's like I'll look out the door, and there'll just be 30 kids or grad students just surrounding her. And you've been such a bright spot for these grad students to come and visit. And I know they're always just picking your brain and visiting with you. And so it's been a huge benefit for at least our program, our grad students, to have you in.
Oh, it's been as much a learning experience for me, and who better to learn from than young people? So it's been fantastic.
and rated too.
And rated.
Don't forget the postdoc. That's the permanent fixture.
The perpetual postdoc.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and one thing to remember is whenever you do venture back to Australia, Oklahoma is always this wet and green. Always. There's always a nice mist. It's kind of like the Garden of Eden, really.
Is
that what you're going to call it?
Garden of something, yeah.
That's why
she's still going to be here in July for at least a little bit.
Okay.
So you got to temper that a little.
I need to retract
Go
that
from
statement.
the sauna to the pizza oven, right?
100%. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for going on with us on the Red Dirt Agronomy podcast.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for having me in Oklahoma. This has just been the best.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation of the Red Dirt Agronomy podcast. And if you'd like to join the next discussion, leave us a message on our website, reddirtagronomy.com. Or you can send us a tweet. Our handle is reddirtag. We'd like to thank Dr. Tieneke Trotter for joining us on the podcast this week. And again, if you get a chance, visit our website, reddirtagronomy.com, to find out more information about our guest and any of the resources that we discussed today on the podcast. For Dr. Josh Lofton, Dr. Brian Arnell, and Dr. Radon Sherry, I am not a doctor, but I play one on a podcast, Dave Deacon, and we all want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Ag Now Media, LLC, 2025. And yes, all rights are reserved.